The wealthiest people you know are not taking bigger risks than you are. They are taking completely different risks, and almost nobody notices the difference until it is far too late. Most ambitious people operate on a backwards belief system. They think that getting ahead requires enormous courage in enormous moments. They imagine successful people as comfortable with catastrophic failure, willing to bet everything on one dramatic move, prepared to lose it all. This image is seductive because it makes success feel like the domain of the fearless, and most of us sense our own fear too acutely to believe we qualify. The reality is almost perfectly inverted. Consider a person we will call Marcus. Marcus is 32, competent at his job in financial services, earns a solid 6 figures, and feels perpetually stuck. He watches other people around him advance faster, build more wealth, gain more influence. He knows he is intelligent. He knows he works hard. He knows he has sacrificed for his career. Yet somehow the wealth and influence he expected by this age have not materialized. This frustrates him deeply because he has done everything he was told to do. 2 hours away in the same industry works a person we will call Sarah. Sarah is also 32. She also earns a good income, but Sarah has built something Marcus has not. She has equity in a small consulting firm. She has developed a specialized skill that commands premium pricing. She has built a personal brand that brings opportunities to her regularly without her needing to pursue them. She has several passive income streams that combine to cover her living expenses. Most importantly, she has optionality. She can choose whether to show up to her corporate job. Marcus cannot. The conventional explanation for Sarah's advantage is that she is braver. She took bigger risks. She was willing to fail. But here is what almost nobody realizes about this. Sarah's actual risks were smaller, far smaller. When she started building her side expertise, she allocated 3 hours per week. When she began documenting her insights publicly, she created 1 article per month. When she started exploring equity in that consulting firm, she negotiated a small ownership stake while keeping her full salary. She risked small sums of capital, small amounts of time, small portions of her reputation, but she thought enormous. She thought about what skill would compound in value over a decade. She thought about what would create leverage for her in the market. She thought about what would make her difficult to replace. She thought about what would be nearly impossible for her to earn back if she quit her job. She thought 10 years ahead while making decisions about what happened in the next 10 weeks. Marcus did the opposite. He was cautious with his actions. He followed the approved path. He did what was recommended. He made safe bets with his time and his career positioning. He played it small. But he thought small too. He thought about whether the promotion would come through this year. He thought about whether his bonus would increase next quarter. He thought about whether his current role looked good on LinkedIn. He thought in terms of immediate, visible returns. And because his thinking was small, his actions never compounded into something larger. He stayed in motion without ever building momentum. This is the asymmetry that separates the two groups so completely that most people cannot see it. The successful people are risking small and thinking enormous. Everyone else is either risking small and thinking small, or, worse, thinking big, while risking everything in catastrophic bets that destroy them. The asymmetry habit is not about courage in the face of danger. It is not about making dramatic moves. It is not about leaving your job to start a business or betting your savings on an opportunity. It is about a completely different operating system for how you evaluate opportunities, how you make decisions, and how you compound small actions into disproportionate results. What makes this framework so powerful is that it is not actually related to your current circumstances. It is not something that requires capital or connections or a perfect background. It is a way of thinking that can be applied immediately, today, in whatever situation you find yourself in. And once you truly understand it, you will begin to see asymmetric opportunities everywhere. You will notice them in conversations, in your career decisions, in how you spend your time, in the relationships you build, in how you position yourself for the future. The paradox is that this framework sounds simple when you first hear it. Think big, risk small. But the moment you try to apply it to your actual life, the complications emerge. What does it actually mean to think enormous? How do you evaluate whether something is genuinely asymmetric or just a false promise? How do you distinguish between reasonable caution and the timidity that keeps people stuck? How do you maintain this discipline when everyone around you is either urging you to be more bold or pressuring you to be more practical? These are the questions that separate the people who understand the asymmetry habit intellectually from the people who actually build wealth and influence using it. And what you are about to learn is not a motivational framework. It is not a shortcut. It is a practical operating system that reorders how you think about risk, how you recognize opportunity, and how you make decisions that compound. The journey from here requires you to unlearn some deeply embedded beliefs about what it means to be successful. It requires you to see risk differently. It requires you to notice patterns that most people have trained themselves not to see. But on the other side of that unlearning is a completely different life trajectory. There is a moment that happens repeatedly in the careers of ambitious people, and it looks almost identical each time. A person becomes uncomfortable with their current situation, not desperate, not in crisis, simply uncomfortable. The role feels stagnant. The trajectory feels too slow. The potential feels capped. So they make a decision that feels bold to them. They decide to go all in on something. They commit completely. Sometimes this means leaving a stable job to start a business. Sometimes it means taking on massive debt for an advanced degree. Sometimes it means relocating to a new city for an opportunity. Sometimes it means taking on a big personal loan to invest in an idea. The specific choice varies, but the underlying pattern is always the same. They are thinking big and risking everything. In their mind, this is what bold looks like. This is what it takes to break through. Consider a woman named Jennifer. She is intelligent, well-educated, and has built a decade-long career in a respectable industry. She has a family, a mortgage, and significant responsibilities. But she has also grown deeply unsatisfied with her work. She feels like she is sleepwalking through someone else's life. She watches people around her who seem to have figured it out, who seem genuinely engaged with what they do, and she wants that. She has convinced herself that the only way to get it is to quit and start her own business. She quits. She is terrified and exhilarated simultaneously. She has taken the plunge. Finally, she is risking everything. This is what bold looks like. She has maybe 8 months of expenses saved. She has told her family she is going all in. She has positioned this as a dramatic turning point in her life story. For the first 3 months, nothing happens. She is building, learning, reaching out, exploring. For the next 2 months, she gets a couple of small projects. She generates a little revenue. But it is not enough. She begins to panic. The fear that was dormant during the planning phase becomes acute. She is now burning through her savings. She is working harder than ever and earning less than she did before. Her family is stressed. She is stressed. By month 8, she is forced to take a job, any job, just to stop the bleeding. Most people who hear this story interpret it as Jennifer's failure. She was not bold enough. She did not have enough capital. She was not prepared. She should have saved more. She should have had more clients lined up. She should have planned better. But this interpretation misses the actual problem entirely. Jennifer did not fail because she took too much risk. She failed because she took exactly the wrong kind of risk while thinking she was being bold. Here is the fundamental inversion that keeps most ambitious people stuck. They have been taught that risk means exposure to catastrophic loss. Bet everything. Go all in. Leave your safety net behind. This is risk. By this definition, Jennifer took enormous risk. She exposed herself to losing her savings, her income stability, her family's security, her career trajectory. But the successful people operating from the asymmetry habit see risk completely differently. Risk, in their framework, is not exposure to loss. Risk is uncertainty about your return on investment of time, capital, or attention. By this definition, Jennifer's biggest risk was not that her business might fail. Her biggest risk was that she was completely uncertain about whether she could actually build a viable business. She had never done it before. She had no track record. She had no clients before she quit. She had no systems. She had no proof of concept. She was risking massive exposure while her probability of success was almost entirely unknown. Meanwhile, what Jennifer considered her safe choice, staying in her job, was actually a profound risk that nobody talks about. She was betting everything on the assumption that one employer would continue to value her for the next 35 years. She was betting that the industry would not be disrupted. She was betting that her skills would remain relevant. She was betting that her salary would keep pace with inflation and her ambitions. She was betting on the stability of one company and one income stream and one career path. This is enormous risk. It is just invisible because it is normalized. The successful people in Sarah's position did something radically different. They kept their stable income. This was not being cautious. This was managing their actual risk exposure. They kept their foundation intact while building something new on the side. They risked small amounts of time and capital in their new venture because they did not yet know if it would work. They built proof of concept. They generated early revenue. They proved the model was viable. Only then did they consider bigger commitments. Think about that for a moment. The person everyone considers cautious was actually managing risk more intelligently than the person everyone considers bold. The person who stayed employed while building something on the side was betting on a diversified portfolio of income and opportunity. The person who quit everything was betting on a single bet with zero validation. This is not a moral statement about boldness or caution. This is an observation about risk literacy. Most ambitious people have been taught an incorrect definition of risk, and this incorrect definition leads them to make catastrophically bad decisions. They confuse exposure to loss with the actual probability of loss. They mistake willingness to suffer with intelligence about risk management. They interpret caution as cowardice rather than as competence. But here is what almost nobody realizes about this reframing. Once you truly understand what risk actually is, uncertainty about outcomes, everything changes about how you operate. You stop trying to prove you are brave. You start trying to reduce uncertainty. You stop betting everything to show you are committed. You start making small bets to test whether something is actually worth betting on. You stop viewing stability as weakness. You start viewing it as the foundation that allows you to be genuinely bold about the right things. The asymmetry habit begins here. It begins with understanding that true risk management and genuine ambition are not opposites. They are companions. And the most successful people have learned to think about risk so differently from everyone else that their caution looks like boldness and their boldness looks like calculated wisdom. Once you understand that risk is fundamentally about uncertainty rather than exposure to loss, you can begin to see opportunities that everyone else has trained themselves to ignore. These opportunities have a specific characteristic. They allow you to risk something small in exchange for potential returns that are disproportionately large. This is the core of the asymmetry habit in practice. But before we explore how to find these opportunities, you need to understand something crucial about how your brain currently evaluates them. Your brain is exceptionally good at spotting potential downsides. It has been trained by evolution to notice threats. This is why you can immediately articulate everything that could go wrong with a new opportunity. Your brain catalogs the risks with remarkable speed and specificity. What your brain has not been trained to do is to recognize and quantify disproportionate upside. The potential gains often feel vague and uncertain compared to the concrete, vivid, specific downsides. This is why most people dismiss opportunities that are actually asymmetric. Consider a scenario that plays out repeatedly in professional environments. A person is invited to speak at an industry conference. No honorarium, no travel reimbursement, just the opportunity to present for 30 minutes to a room of 200 professionals. The person's immediate thought process goes like this. What will it cost me? 2 days of time, travel expenses, time away from my current projects. What will I gain? Maybe some contacts. Maybe someone interesting will reach out. Maybe my name will be vaguely familiar to people in the room. The costs are concrete and certain. The gains are abstract and uncertain, so most people decline. But consider what actually happens to someone who accepts. They prepare a presentation on their area of expertise. This forces them to organize their thinking more clearly than they have in months. They attend the conference. They meet people in their industry. They have conversations they would never have otherwise had. One person in the room is a hiring manager at a firm that is significantly larger than their current employer. Another person is considering starting a venture, and wants to talk about what they heard in the presentation. A third person is a potential collaborator on a project that could generate significant revenue. Most of these connections go nowhere immediately, but one of them plants a seed. 6 months later, an opportunity materializes that would not have materialized without that conference presentation. The person who declined sees none of this. They kept their 2 days. They saved their travel money. They protected themselves from the small certain cost. In doing so, they eliminated the potential for the massive uncertain gain. They made a decision based on managing the downside when they should have been evaluating the upside. This is the asymmetry habit in real time. The person who accepted was risking small and thinking enormous. They were willing to invest 2 days and some money because they understood that exposure to hundreds of professionals who could have significant impact on their career was asymmetric. The probability of something transformative might have been low, but if something did happen, the upside would be disproportionate to what they risked. The person who declined was thinking small. They were focused on the certain cost rather than the possible gain. They were managing downside rather than capturing upside. And because they optimized for avoiding small certain losses, they systematically eliminated themselves from situations where large uncertain gains might occur. Here is what almost nobody realizes about this pattern. The asymmetric opportunities in your life are not rare. They are everywhere. They are just obscured by your brain's tendency to focus on concrete costs and discount abstract gains. A conversation with someone who works in an adjacent field, an uncomfortable project that would force you to develop a new skill, a volunteer position that would expose you to people and ideas outside your normal network, a course on a topic tangentially related to your work, a side project that seems frivolous but aligns with an emerging trend. Your brain catalogs the costs immediately and dismisses the opportunity because the gains are too uncertain. But the people who build disproportionate wealth and influence have learned to reverse this calculation. They do not ask, "What will this cost me?" They ask, "What is the realistic worst case if this fails, and can I absorb it?" If the answer is yes, they ask the second question. What is the realistic best case if this succeeds, and what is the probability of that outcome? If the best case is materially larger than what they risked, they move forward. Think about that distinction for a moment. One question leads to a focus on downside protection. The other leads to a focus on upside capture. Most people spend their entire lives perfecting the first question while ignoring the second. The asymmetry habit requires you to become skilled at both, but to weight the second question more heavily than you currently do. The psychology that enables this shift is deceptively simple. You have to stop thinking of a single outcome and start thinking of a portfolio of outcomes. When you attend a conference, the most likely outcome is that nothing happens. Your time was invested, and you have nothing obvious to show for it. But if you attend 50 conferences over a decade, the laws of probability guarantee that something significant will emerge from at least one of them. The person who understands this thinks differently about each individual conference. They are not betting on that specific conference changing their life. They are building a portfolio of small bets, each with low probability of immediate payoff, but with the compound effect of creating disproportionate results over time. This reframing is what separates the people who feel stuck from the people who seem to progress almost mysteriously. It is not that the successful people have better luck. It is that they have positioned themselves in countless asymmetric situations where something significant could happen. By the laws of probability, something eventually will. And because they have positioned themselves broadly, they are never dependent on any single outcome. What comes next is the part that most people skip entirely, and it is exactly why their asymmetric positioning never actually converts into results. There is a conversation that happens frequently among ambitious people, and it reveals everything about why positioning is not enough. Two people are presented with the exact same opportunity. Both see it. Both understand the asymmetric potential. Both recognize that the risk is small relative to the possible upside. Yet one person pursues it, and the other walks away. The conventional explanation is that one person is braver. But the real reason is far more psychological than that. Identity determines which asymmetric opportunities you can actually see, and more importantly, which ones you feel capable of pursuing. Consider two professionals who both work in technology. We will call them David and Marcus. David and Marcus are similarly talented. They have similar educational backgrounds. They work at comparable companies and earn similar salaries. They are both ambitious, but they have fundamentally different views of who they are and what they are capable of. David sees himself as an engineer. This identity came from his first job and calcified over a decade. He is good at technical problem solving. He is reliable. He writes clean code. He is valued in his company for his competence in his narrow domain. This identity feels safe. It feels earned. When an asymmetric opportunity presents itself that requires him to do something outside his engineer identity, say, leading a team or building a business or speaking publicly about his work, David experiences something very specific. He experiences it as a threat to his identity. His internal dialogue sounds like this: I am not a leader. I am not a business person. I am not a public speaker. I could fail at this and damage how I see myself. Marcus sees himself differently. Marcus also started as an engineer, but somewhere along the way, he stopped defining himself by his current role and started defining himself by his trajectory. His identity is not engineer. His identity is someone who is building something significant and who figures out how to do whatever that requires. When an asymmetric opportunity presents itself, Marcus evaluates it differently. He is not asking, is this consistent with who I am? He is asking, does this move me closer to where I am trying to go? He will lead if that is required. He will speak publicly if that advances his goals. He will learn new skills. He will work outside his comfort zone. Both men see the same opportunity. Both understand the asymmetric potential intellectually. But Marcus can actually pursue it, and David cannot, not because David is less brave, but because Marcus's identity is built on growth, and David's identity is built on protection. This is the invisible force that determines which asymmetric opportunities you actually convert into results. It is not your intelligence. It is not your work ethic. It is not your capital or your connections. It is your internal sense of who you are and what you are capable of becoming. The most successful people have not built an identity around a specific role or title or skill. They have built an identity around continuous expansion. They see themselves as people who figure things out, people who learn, people who move toward what matters even when they have not yet mastered it. Most people have done the opposite. They have built their identity around their current competence. They are good at one thing, so they see themselves as the kind of person who is that one thing. This feels stable in the moment. It feels like you have figured something out. It feels safe. But this identity is a prison, and you cannot see the bars because the prison is built from what you are already good at. Here is what almost nobody understands about the relationship between identity and opportunity. Your identity determines the opportunities you can perceive. This is not metaphorical. This is neurological. Your brain literally filters information based on your existing self-concept. If your identity is, I am a financial analyst, you will see opportunities related to financial analysis. You will be blind to opportunities related to technology or communication or building new ventures. Your brain is literally filtering out information that contradicts your identity. It is not that these opportunities do not exist around you. It is that you cannot see them because they require you to become someone you do not see yourself as. The people who build asymmetric wealth operate from a fundamentally different identity structure. They see themselves as capable of learning whatever is necessary. They see themselves as experimenters and explorers rather than as specialists. They see themselves as people who move toward interesting problems even when they have not yet solved that type of problem before. This identity structure does not protect them from failure. It exposes them to it. But it also exposes them to an entirely different set of opportunities because they can perceive opportunities that require growth. Think about that distinction. A person with a specialist identity stays within their domain of mastery. They are protected from failure, but also protected from growth. A person with an explorer identity leaves their domain of mastery regularly. They will fail at new things, but they will also encounter asymmetric opportunities that a specialist could never see. Over time, through multiple cycles of exploration and learning, they build something far larger than any specialist can build alone. The asymmetry habit cannot be separated from identity because your identity determines which asymmetric opportunities you can actually pursue. This is why two people in identical circumstances, with identical intelligence and identical opportunities, end up in completely different places. One has an identity that allows them to see and pursue asymmetric opportunities. The other has an identity that filters them out. There is a behavioral pattern that shows up almost universally in people who eventually build significant influence and wealth. Early in their careers, they did something that terrified them. They took on a role they did not feel ready for. They started a project they were not sure they could complete. They spoke publicly when they were certain they would fail. And remarkably, something happened. They did not collapse. They did not prove themselves fraudulent. They actually succeeded, usually better than they expected. But more importantly, something shifted in their internal sense of who they was. If they could do that, what else could they do? This experience became the foundation for a new identity. Not, I am good at X, but I am someone who figures out Y even when I have not done it before. This shift in identity is what allows someone to see and pursue an entirely new category of asymmetric opportunities. And the most successful people cycle through this repeatedly throughout their careers. They periodically move into territory where they are uncertain, they succeed, their identity expands, new opportunities become visible. Once you understand that identity shapes which opportunities you can perceive and pursue, something unexpected becomes visible. The people who have built the most remarkable careers and accumulated the most genuine wealth are rarely the ones who made one dramatic move. They are the ones who made hundreds of small moves over a decade or two, each one slightly outside their previous capability, each one building on what came before, each one compounding into something that looks like overnight success to people who were not paying attention. The timeline illusion is one of the most dangerous distortions in how ambitious people think about building something significant. You see someone at the peak of their influence or wealth, and you see the current state. You see their podcast with millions of listeners. You see their business generating millions in revenue. You see their reputation and credibility in their field. You extrapolate backwards, and you imagine that this person must have made some brilliant decision 5 years ago that set everything in motion. In reality, the truth is almost always much less dramatic. That person made a small decision 8 years ago. They committed 3 hours a week to something that mattered to them. They made another small decision 6 years ago. They took on a project that forced them to develop a new skill. They made another small decision 4 years ago. They spoke up in a meeting when they normally would have stayed silent. They made another small decision 2 years ago. They shared their thinking publicly, even though it terrified them. None of these decisions was dramatic. None of them felt like a turning point when they made it. But each one built on the previous ones. Each one expanded their capability. Each one opened doors that had not been visible before. And because they made these decisions repeatedly over years, the compounding became irresistible. A skill learned in year 1 made the project in year 2 easier to execute. The credibility built in year 2 made the public positioning in year 3 more effective. The network built in year 3 made the opportunities in year 4 appear with less friction. By year 8, it looks like this person suddenly became successful. In reality, they have been compounding small, asymmetric advantages for nearly a decade. Consider a woman we will call Rachel. Rachel works as a marketing manager at a mid-sized software company. She is competent. She does her job well. But her title and salary have plateaued. She wants something more, but she has no idea how to get there. The leap from her current position to a genuinely senior role or to building her own thing feels impossibly large. The gap is too wide. She would have to be significantly more accomplished, more connected, more visible, more credible. So she stays where she is, waiting for something to change, hoping for an opportunity that will materially alter her trajectory. Meanwhile, a person we will call Thomas is in almost identical circumstances. Same company, same title, same salary, same gap between where he is and where he wants to be. But Thomas thinks about the gap differently. Instead of seeing it as an impossibly large space to cross all at once, he sees it as something that can be crossed through accumulated small decisions. He commits to writing one substantive article about marketing strategy per month. This takes maybe 3 hours. It is asymmetric because the time cost is small, but the potential upside is disproportionate. If any of these articles resonates, if it gets shared, if it reaches the right people, it could materially impact how he is perceived in his field. For the first 3 months, nothing obvious happens. His articles get maybe 100 views each. He knows a few more people have his work in their email inbox, nothing that feels like progress. But Thomas does not expect progress from a single article. He is thinking about the portfolio effect. He is thinking about what happens if he publishes 50 articles over 2 years. He is thinking about the compound effect of building a body of work that demonstrates his thinking. So he continues. By month 6, one of his articles gets shared by an influential person in his industry. His view count spikes. By month 9, a recruiter reaches out because they found his work and it impressed them. By month 14, he is invited to speak at an industry conference. By month 18, he has a small consulting opportunity on the side. By month 22, his reputation in his field has shifted materially. He is no longer just a competent marketing manager at a mid-sized company. He is someone whose thinking is respected. He is someone people want to work with. None of this happened because of one brilliant move. All of it happened because Thomas made a small asymmetric decision and then repeated that decision and then repeated it again. He trusted the compounding. He did not expect each individual article to change everything. He expected that over time, the accumulated body of work would open doors. This is where patience becomes the most underrated competitive advantage. The people who build genuine wealth and influence have not necessarily been the smartest people in the room, or the most talented, or the most connected. They have been the people willing to make small asymmetric bets repeatedly, year after year, trusting that the compounding will eventually become visible. Most people cannot do this because it requires a type of patience that runs counter to everything modern culture teaches you. Modern culture teaches you to expect rapid results, to measure progress in months, to become frustrated if something does not generate obvious payoff within a quarter, to abandon approaches that do not produce immediate returns. But compounding does not work on this timeline. The first year of small asymmetric decisions generates almost no visible result. This is why most people stop. They try the approach for a few months, see minimal progress, and return to whatever they were doing before. But if you can extend your timeline, if you can commit to the asymmetric approach for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, something remarkable happens. The compounding becomes visible. The small decisions from years 1 and 2 begin to interact with the small decisions from years 3 and 4. Opportunities emerge that would have been impossible to see from the starting point. Credibility accumulates, relationships deepen, skills compound, and suddenly you are in a completely different position than where you started. This is not luck. This is not talent. This is the natural result of making small asymmetric decisions consistently over an extended period. The challenge is that almost nobody has the patience for this. They want the result now. They want the visible transformation this year. They want proof that the approach is working before they commit fully to it. And because they want these things, they abandon the very approach that would have generated them. The patience to compound small asymmetric decisions over years is essential, but patience alone is not sufficient. You can make consistent small decisions in the wrong position and watch them generate minimal returns. You can make consistent small decisions in the right position and watch them generate remarkable returns. The difference is positioning, and almost nobody thinks strategically about it. Positioning is not a word that most ambitious people use to describe their careers or their lives. They think about skills, they think about effort, they think about opportunity. But positioning is the invisible force that determines whether your effort compounds into influence or simply dissipates into noise. Positioning is the choice of where you place yourself in relation to markets, relationships, and opportunity flows. Consider 2 people who both commit to building their expertise and visibility in their field. We will call them Alex and Jordan. Both work in technology. Both are talented. Both decide to build their personal brand. Both commit to writing, speaking, and building their network. Both make small, consistent decisions year after year. Alex positions himself in a large, crowded market. There are thousands of people in his field, all doing similar things, all writing about similar topics, all trying to build visibility. Alex is competing for attention in an environment where the noise is overwhelming. He is making small, asymmetric bets, but the environment is not asymmetric. Everyone around him has access to the same channels, the same platforms, the same audience. His visibility grows, but it grows slowly because he is one voice among thousands. His network expands, but the expansion is hindered by the fact that everyone in the market is trying to build the same network. By year 5, Alex has built something respectable, but his results do not feel commensurate with his effort. Jordan positions herself differently. She identifies a narrow, underserved segment of the technology market. It is not crowded. There are maybe a few hundred people doing serious work in this space. The market is growing, but still small. Jordan positions herself as someone building expertise and visibility specifically in this segment. She writes about this niche. She speaks at conferences focused on this niche. She builds relationships with the other people working seriously in this space. Her visibility is not as broad as Alex's, but it is far deeper in a specific domain. Here is what happens over the next 5 years. Because Jordan is one of the few serious voices in her specific segment, her work gains disproportionate attention within that market. She becomes genuinely known. When opportunities emerge in her space, she is one of the first people think of. Her small, consistent decisions compound more effectively because she is not competing in a crowded field. She is one of the recognizable figures in a small, defined market. By year 5, her influence within her niche is disproportionate to her effort. Both Alex and Jordan made similar decisions. Both committed to consistency. Both did the same small asymmetric work. But Jordan's positioning made her efforts compound far more effectively. She was making the same number of moves, but in an environment where each move had greater leverage. This is the strategic dimension of positioning that most people miss. You can make good decisions in a bad position, and the results will be mediocre. You can make mediocre decisions in a good position, and the results will be impressive. The leverage comes primarily from position, not from the quality of individual decisions. This is counterintuitive because you are taught to focus on being excellent. But excellence in the wrong position is tragic. It generates minimal returns. Excellence in the right position is unstoppable. Small moves create enormous effects. There are several dimensions of positioning to consider. Market positioning is one. Which market are you playing in? Is it crowded or underserved? Is it growing or mature? Is it attracting the right kind of attention and capital? Relationship positioning is another. Are you connected to the people who matter in your field? Not connected in the sense of being friendly with them, but positioned as someone they pay attention to and value. Career positioning is another. Are you in a role that generates visibility and opportunity? Or are you in a role that obscures your work, even if your work is excellent? Most people never think strategically about any of these dimensions. They accept the default position that circumstances have placed them in. They are in whatever job they found. They are in whatever market they happen to start in. They are connected to whatever network they built by chance. And they wonder why consistent effort generates minimal results. The successful people have learned to think backwards from results. They ask themselves, what position would make my work most visible? What market would make small moves most leveraged? What relationships would amplify my efforts? And then they position themselves accordingly. This often means saying no to opportunities that look attractive but put you in the wrong position. It means choosing a slightly lower-paying job because it provides better positioning. It means leaving a larger market for a smaller one where you can build genuine influence faster. Ask yourself honestly right now, where are you positioned? Are you in a role that makes your work visible or invisible? Are you in a market where your efforts have leverage or where you are competing against thousands of similar voices? Are you connected to the people and networks that matter in your field, or are you isolated? These are not comfortable questions to answer. The answers often reveal that you are in a mediocre position, which explains why your efforts have generated mediocre returns. But here is what almost nobody realizes about positioning. It is not fixed. You can reposition. It takes time. It takes strategic decisions. But you can move yourself from a crowded market to an underserved one. You can move yourself from a role that obscures your work to a role that amplifies it. You can rebuild your relationships and your network around the people and opportunities that matter most. The people who understand the asymmetry habit do this consciously and repeatedly. They are not just thinking about whether to make a move. They are thinking about whether that move improves their positioning. They are not just thinking about whether to say yes to an opportunity. They are thinking about whether that opportunity puts them in a better position for the next 5 years. They are thinking about position the way a chess player thinks about position. Each move is evaluated not just for its immediate benefit, but for how it sets them up for the moves that come after. What comes next is where most people with good positioning still fail to convert it into results. There is a particular type of failure that happens to intelligent, ambitious people with increasing frequency. They understand the asymmetry habit intellectually. They understand positioning. They understand the power of small, consistent decisions. They have positioned themselves well. They have the time and the resources to make asymmetric moves. They genuinely believe they are going to do this. And then nothing happens. Years pass, and they are still in the same position, having made none of the small, consistent moves they promised themselves they would make. This is not a problem of understanding. It is a problem of execution. And it reveals something crucial about why most people do not build wealth and influence, even when they have all the right frameworks and all the right positioning. The gap between thinking big and acting small is where most ambitious people fail. They can articulate ambitious visions. They can imagine themselves 5 years ahead in a position of greater influence and success. They can understand the asymmetry principle perfectly. But when it comes time to actually make the small moves, something breaks. They do not follow through. They make a few half-hearted attempts and then drift back to the default. They wait for the perfect moment to launch. They wait for more time. They wait for the right circumstances. They wait for motivation. And while they are waiting, nothing compounds. Consider a person we will call Simon. Simon is a software engineer with 8 years of experience. He is skilled at his job. He earns a solid income. But he has watched people around him build careers that are dramatically more successful than his own. They have become technical leaders. They have built their own companies. They have become known in their field. Simon wants this too. He genuinely does. He has told himself repeatedly that he is going to build his reputation. He is going to start a side project. He is going to contribute to open source. He is going to write about his technical insights. He believes all of this. But Simon has a pattern. He gets excited about the idea of building his reputation. He spends a weekend reading books about personal branding. He spends another weekend researching the best platforms to publish on. He spends another weekend outlining what his first article should be about. By week 4, his initial momentum has dissipated. He has not written anything. He tells himself he will start next month when things are less busy. Next month arrives and he is busy again. He promises himself he will start in the new year. The new year arrives and he is still busy. 3 years pass and Simon has not written a single article. He has not contributed to open source. He has not launched his side project. But he still believes he is going to do these things. He still thinks about it regularly. He still sees the unrealized potential. The problem is not that Simon does not understand what he needs to do. He understands perfectly. The problem is that understanding is not the same as doing. The problem is that his ambition is not connected to disciplined small action. He thinks big. He dreams big. He plans big. But he does not act small. And because he does not act small consistently, nothing compounds. This failure mode is particularly common among intelligent people because intelligence creates a specific trap. Intelligent people are good at planning. They are good at envisioning possibilities. They are good at understanding frameworks and principles. So they mistake planning for action. They mistake understanding for progress. They spend enormous amounts of mental energy imagining the future and thinking about what they should do. And then they are confused and frustrated when the future does not arrive just from thinking about it. The asymmetry habit requires something that planning does not require. It requires disciplined repetition of small actions even when those actions generate no immediate visible results. It requires showing up even when you do not feel like it. It requires making the move even when you have not yet perfected your approach. It requires accepting that the first version will be imperfect and doing it anyway. This is where most people break down. Think about that for a moment. The framework is simple. Make small, asymmetric bets. Repeat them consistently. Trust the compounding. But the execution is not simple. The execution requires you to do something that generates no visible return, repeatedly, even though your brain is screaming that you should stop. Your brain wants evidence that the approach is working. It wants to see results before it commits more effort. But results do not appear until you have made the effort repeatedly. This is the catch-22 that defeats most people. The people who actually build things have learned to operate differently. They have learned to separate the planning phase from the execution phase. Planning is when you think big. Planning is when you figure out the asymmetric moves worth making. Planning is when you evaluate positioning. Planning is when you dream. But planning has a defined endpoint. At some point, planning stops and execution begins. And during execution, you do not think big, you think small. You commit to one small action. You do that action, you complete it, you do it again. You do not wait for perfection. You do not wait for the perfect moment. You do not wait for all the stars to align. You execute. The specific trap that defeats ambitious people is confusing the quality of their thinking with the quality of their execution. Simon thinks about building his reputation in sophisticated ways. He understands personal branding. He understands positioning. He understands the asymmetry principle, but his thinking is not action, and the world only rewards action. The world does not care how sophisticated your thinking is if you do not actually do anything. Here is what almost nobody realizes about the people who seem to progress mysteriously. They are not smarter than you are. They are not more talented than you are. They are simply more willing to do something imperfect repeatedly. They wrote the first article, even though it was not as good as they wanted. They shipped the first version of their side project, even though it had flaws. They spoke up in the meeting, even though they had not formulated the perfect thing to say. They did the small thing imperfectly, rather than waiting to do it perfectly. This distinction between perfect and done is the invisible line between people who build something and people who remain stuck in potential. Potential is where the thinking happens. Potential is where the dreaming happens. Potential is where the planning happens. But potential is not where anything real gets built. Real things get built when you move from potential into done, even if done is imperfect. The asymmetry habit cannot exist without this willingness to do small things imperfectly. You cannot wait for the perfect moment to make your first small move. You cannot wait until you have thought through every possible angle. You cannot wait until you are certain it will work. You have to move forward into uncertainty. You have to execute while your confidence is still incomplete. You have to do the thing even though you are not sure you are ready. Once you understand that execution matters more than perfect planning, a new problem emerges. You are ready to make small, asymmetric decisions. You understand the principle. You want to apply it. But when you are actually living your life, in the middle of a busy day, with dozens of demands on your attention, how do you actually recognize an asymmetric opportunity? How do you distinguish between the thousands of things competing for your time and the specific things that are worth a small investment? Most people do not have a framework for this, so they operate by default. They respond to whatever is loudest or most urgent. They do what they are asked to do. They follow the path of least resistance. They do what they have always done. And because they do not have a decision framework, they systematically miss the asymmetric opportunities that are happening around them constantly. The people who have built genuine wealth and influence operate differently. They have internalized a simple filter. When they encounter an opportunity or a decision point, they run it through a mental model. Is this asymmetric? Can I risk something small? Is the potential upside disproportionate? Will this position me better for what comes next? They do this evaluation quickly, almost automatically, because they have practiced it so many times that it has become intuitive. Consider a specific scenario. A colleague reaches out and asks if you would like to collaborate on a side project. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that requires you to make a major commitment. Just a side project. Your default response is probably one of three things. You say yes because you are polite and it is easier than saying no. You say no because you are busy and you do not have time. Or you say maybe and then never follow up. None of these responses involves actually evaluating whether the opportunity is asymmetric. But imagine you ran it through a different filter. What is the time commitment? Maybe 5 hours per month. What is the risk? The risk is the time. What is the upside? Your colleague works in an adjacent field. You have complementary skills. You might build something interesting. You might learn something. The project might not go anywhere, but it might also open doors you cannot currently see. Is the potential upside disproportionate to 5 hours per month? The answer is probably yes. Small time investment. Potentially large learning or network or credibility upside. The asymmetry filter would lead you to say yes. Not because it is the path of least resistance, but because you have evaluated it and determined that it is worth a small bet. But here is where most people still fail. They say yes. They feel good about making the asymmetric decision, and then life gets busy, and the project gets deprioritized, and they do not show up consistently, and the potential of the collaboration never converts into actual results because they did not actually execute on the small commitment they made. This is why the asymmetry habit requires two components. First, you need the filter to recognize asymmetric opportunities. But second, you need the discipline to actually execute on them. You cannot just say yes to asymmetric opportunities. You have to say yes and then follow through. This is where the habit component becomes crucial. Think about that distinction. Most people are not lacking opportunities. They are not lacking the ability to recognize them. They are lacking the habit of actually executing on the small commitments they make. They say yes to too many things and follow through on too few. They scatter their energy across dozens of small bets and never give any of them enough consistency to compound. The successful people operate differently. They are far more selective about what they say yes to. They do not say yes to every asymmetric opportunity. They say yes to a specific portfolio of asymmetric opportunities that align with their positioning and their ambitions. And then they execute consistently on those specific commitments. They do not scatter their energy. They concentrate it. Here is a practical framework you can use to build this into your daily decision-making. When you encounter an opportunity, ask yourself 3 questions. First, is this asymmetric? Can I risk something small in exchange for potentially disproportionate upside? If the answer is no, do not do it. If the answer is yes, ask the second question. Does this fit my current positioning and ambitions? Will it move me closer to where I am trying to go? If the answer is no, do not do it. If the answer is yes, ask the third question. Can I commit to executing on this consistently for the next 6 months? This is the crucial question. You are not asking if you want to do it. You are asking if you can actually commit to showing up even when you do not feel like it, even when it does not feel urgent, even when other things are demanding your attention. If the answer to all 3 questions is yes, you say yes, and then you treat that commitment as non-negotiable. You block time for it. You show up. You execute. You do not deprioritize it the moment something else becomes urgent. You honor the small commitment you made because you understand that the compounding only works if the commitment is honored repeatedly. Most people fail at this because they say yes to too many things. They evaluate opportunities individually without considering the cumulative load. They say yes to the side project and the conference speaking and the networking group and the mentoring and the writing and the skill building. Each one individually passes the asymmetry filter, but collectively they are impossible to execute on consistently. The person spreads their energy too thin. Nothing compounds because nothing gets enough consistent effort. The asymmetry habit requires saying no far more often than you say yes. It requires brutal honesty about how much consistent energy you actually have available. It requires choosing a specific portfolio of asymmetric bets and protecting those bets against the constant stream of other opportunities. Ask yourself right now, how many commitments do you have that you made because they seemed asymmetric, but that you are not executing on consistently? A course you enrolled in, but do not complete. A writing project you intended to start. A networking group you said you would attend. a skill you said you would develop. Most ambitious people have a list of these. These are the failed asymmetric bets. They represent energy that was scattered rather than concentrated. The next level of the asymmetry habit is learning to recognize these leaks. These are commitments that looked good on paper, but that you cannot actually execute on consistently given your life circumstances. Once you recognize them, you have two choices. You can either recommit and actually execute, or you can let them go. Most people do neither. They stay committed in theory while failing to execute in practice. This creates a state of constant low-grade guilt and failure. It is far better to be honest about what you can and cannot do. But what happens when you are honest about your capacity? What happens when you ruthlessly say no to most opportunities and say yes only to a specific portfolio of asymmetric bets that you actually execute on? The compounding begins. The small, consistent decisions start to interact. The pattern recognition deepens. The results accelerate. There is something that happens when people encounter this reality, and it shifts everything about how they think about themselves. There is a brutal reality about asymmetric opportunities that almost nobody discusses. The same small decision can have radically different outcomes depending on when you make it and what environment you are making it in. Timing and context are not add-ons to the asymmetry habit. They are integral to it. And most people either ignore this reality entirely or become paralyzed by uncertainty about whether the timing is right. Consider two scenarios that illustrate this perfectly. In the first scenario, a person decides to build expertise and visibility in a specific technology niche. They start writing about it, speaking about it, building their network in that space. For the first 2 years, nothing dramatic happens, but their timing is fortunate. Unknown to them, the technology they chose to specialize in is about to become mainstream. Industry investment is increasing. Companies are beginning to hire people with expertise in this area. By year 3, the demand for people with genuine expertise is accelerating. The person's positioning, which was obscure a year earlier, is suddenly valuable. The small, consistent decisions they made when nobody was paying attention suddenly compound exponentially. They are one of the few people who has invested years building credibility in a space that is now rapidly expanding. The asymmetric bets they made are now generating disproportionate returns, not because their decisions were more brilliant than anyone else's, but because those decisions intersected with a favorable market environment. In the second scenario, a different person makes an almost identical decision. They specialize in a different technology. They make the same small, consistent moves. They build their expertise. They build their network. They build their visibility. But their timing is unfortunate. The technology they chose to specialize in becomes less relevant over time. The market moves in a different direction. By year 3, their expertise is becoming obsolete. The asymmetric bets they made are not generating disproportionate returns because the environment changed. The same approach, applied with equal discipline and consistency, generates completely different results because the context shifted. This is the dimension of the asymmetry habit that most people do not want to acknowledge. You cannot completely control outcomes. You can make intelligent decisions. You can position yourself well. You can execute with discipline. But you cannot control the broader environment that your decisions operate within. Market cycles happen. Industries shift. Technology becomes obsolete. Opportunities emerge that you did not anticipate. The environment is not static, and your success is not purely a function of your decisions. But here is what the most successful people understand about this reality. While you cannot control the environment, you can position yourself to benefit from environmental shifts rather than be destroyed by them. You can build optionality. You can diversify your bets. You can pay attention to emerging trends rather than being blindsided by them. You can build skills and credibility that transfer across multiple domains rather than being entirely dependent on one specific niche. You cannot predict the future, but you can position yourself to survive and thrive across multiple possible futures. This is a different kind of asymmetry than the small bets versus large upside asymmetry. This is systemic asymmetry. It is the difference between a portfolio that is fragile and breaks when conditions change, and a portfolio that is resilient and actually becomes stronger when conditions change. Consider again the person who specialized in a technology that became obsolete. If they had thought asymmetrically about the environment, they might have done things differently. They might have built deeper relationships with people across the industry, not just people in their specific niche. They might have developed adjacent skills that transferred to related technologies. They might have built a personal brand that was not entirely dependent on one specific expertise. They might have maintained optionality by keeping one foot in multiple domains rather than going all in on a single domain. The people who have built the most resilient careers and the most lasting influence are not the ones who picked the perfect niche and went all in. They are the ones who picked a primary direction but maintained the optionality to shift if the environment required it. They built leverage in one domain, but skills that transferred to adjacent domains. They built a reputation that was specific enough to be credible, but broad enough to survive if conditions changed. Think about that distinction. One person bets everything on one specific outcome. They go all in on one niche, one company, one skill, one market. If that works out, they do phenomenally well. But if the environment shifts, they are catastrophically exposed. The other person makes their primary bets, but hedges their risk by maintaining optionality. Their primary bet might not compound as explosively, but it is far more likely to generate positive returns, even if the environment shifts. The asymmetry habit at this level is not just about making small bets with large potential upside. It is about constructing your life and your career in such a way that you benefit from multiple possible futures, not just one. It is about positioning yourself so that emerging opportunities are visible to you before they become obvious to everyone else. It is about building skills and relationships that have durable value across different environments rather than fleeting value in one specific environment. Here is the practical implication. When you are evaluating asymmetric opportunities, you should be asking not just, is this asymmetric, but also, how does this improve my positioning across multiple possible futures? You should be asking not just, does this move me closer to my goal, but also, does this give me optionality if my goal changes or if the environment changes? Most people do not think this way. They commit to a single vision of the future and optimize entirely for that vision. They sacrifice optionality for focus. They go all in on one bet. And then, if conditions shift, they find themselves catastrophically exposed. They have spent years building expertise in a domain that is no longer valuable. They have built a network in a market that is no longer growing. They have positioned themselves in a way that is no longer relevant. The successful people think differently. They commit to a direction, yes. They focus, yes. But they do so while maintaining the optionality to shift if the environment requires it. They build depth in one domain while maintaining breadth across adjacent domains. They build influence in one community while staying connected to neighboring communities. They develop primary skills while continuing to build adjacent skills. They are not trying to optimize for one specific future. They are trying to optimize for thriving across multiple possible futures. This is the sophisticated version of the asymmetry habit. It is not enough to make small bets with large potential upside. You have to make those bets in a way that improves your resilience and your optionality. You have to think about how your decisions compound not just in the narrow niche you are focusing on, but across the broader ecosystem that you operate within. You have to think about timing and environment not as uncontrollable forces, but as dimensions you can navigate if you maintain the right positioning. What becomes clear at this point is that the asymmetry habit is not really about individual decisions at all. It is about a way of operating that becomes embedded into everything you do. The trajectory of someone who has truly internalized the asymmetry habit is almost unrecognizable compared to someone who is still learning it. In the early stages, applying the framework requires conscious effort. You are evaluating opportunities. You are asking yourself the questions. You are making deliberate choices about positioning and timing and risk. It feels like work. It requires energy. You are thinking about thinking asymmetrically, but something remarkable happens over time. After you have applied the framework across dozens of decisions, across multiple years, across different domains, it stops being something you do and starts being something you are. Your instincts shift. Your intuition shifts. You begin to automatically recognize asymmetric opportunities. You begin to automatically evaluate risk differently. You begin to automatically think about positioning and environment and timing. The framework becomes embedded so deeply that you stop having to consciously apply it. It is simply how you operate. This is when the asymmetry habit reaches its full power. It is no longer an intellectual framework you are trying to implement. It is a permanent operating system. Consider what this actually looks like in practice. A person with this embedded operating system receives a job offer. They evaluate it differently than someone still learning the framework. They are not just asking, is this a good job? Will I earn more? Will I have more prestige? They are asking, how does this position me for the next 5 years? Will this role give me visibility to the right people? Will this give me credibility in my field? Will this expand my optionality or constrain it? Can I continue my other asymmetric bets while in this role, or will this job consume everything? These questions are not running in the background of their consciousness. They are intuitive, they are automatic. A person with this embedded operating system encounters a networking opportunity. They are not making a conscious calculation about whether to attend. They are not weighing the explicit costs and benefits. They are simply aware, from deep pattern recognition, that certain types of connections are asymmetric. They expand their network in specific directions, not randomly. They build relationships with intention. They understand that their network is their net worth, and they manage it accordingly. This is not something they think about anymore. It is how they naturally operate. A person with this embedded operating system reads an article about an emerging trend. They are not just consuming information passively. They are asking themselves, how might this shift the environment I operate in? How can I position myself to benefit from this shift before it becomes obvious? What small moves can I make today that will compound if this trend accelerates? They are thinking forward. They are pattern matching. They are positioning. This has become their default mode. The people who reach this level are not necessarily the smartest people. They are not necessarily the most talented. They are the people who have had enough repetitions of the framework that it has become automatic. They have made asymmetric bets enough times that they have internalized what they look like. They have made small, consistent decisions enough times that they trust the compounding without needing external validation. They have shifted their identity enough times that their sense of self is now fundamentally different from where they started. Here is what becomes visible when you observe someone operating at this level. They are not stressed about competition. They are not anxious about whether they are doing enough. They are not desperate about opportunities. They operate from a completely different baseline. They understand that they do not have to win every opportunity because they have positioned themselves in a portfolio of asymmetric opportunities. They understand that they do not have to hit every home run because they are making many small bets and the laws of probability guarantee that some will work. They understand that timing and environment matter, but they have positioned themselves to benefit from multiple possible futures. They operate with a quiet confidence that comes from understanding something fundamental about how value is actually built. This confidence is not arrogance. It is not delusion. It is grounded in repeated experience of seeing small, consistent decisions compound into significant results. It is grounded in having made mistakes and recovered from them because they were positioned to recover. It is grounded in having seen opportunities emerge that they did not anticipate because they were positioned broadly enough to see them. It is grounded in understanding that while they cannot control outcomes, they can control positioning, and positioning determines probability. When you reach this level, something else shifts. You stop evaluating your worth based on your current title, or your current salary, or your current position. You evaluate your worth based on your optionality. How many paths are available to you? How many ways could your life improve significantly? How resilient is your position? How many asymmetric opportunities are available to you? These become your real measures of success. And almost paradoxically, as these measures improve, your title and salary and position almost always improve as well. But they improve because you have stopped optimizing for them directly and started optimizing for something more fundamental. The asymmetry habit at its deepest level is not really about money or status or influence, even though it tends to produce all three. It is about building a life where you have genuine agency, where you are not dependent on any single employer or any single income stream or any single opportunity. Where you have built such a broad portfolio of asymmetric bets that you are always positioned to move toward what matters most. Where you can choose. Where you are free. Most people spend their entire lives in a position of constrained choice. They have to say yes to whatever pays their bills because they have no alternatives. They have to stay in whatever situation they are in because they have not built optionality. They have to pretend to be someone they are not because they have not built enough credibility to be themselves. They are trapped not by malice, but by their own decisions or lack thereof. By the positions they accepted. By the asymmetric bets they did not make. By the optionality they did not build. The people who have embedded the asymmetry habit operate from a completely different position. They have built enough optionality that they can walk away. They have built enough credibility that they can speak their truth. They have positioned themselves broadly enough that they are never dependent on any single outcome. They have genuine choice. And this freedom, this agency, is perhaps the deepest asymmetry of all. Not the financial returns, not the status or influence, but the freedom to choose how to spend your finite time on this earth. This is what the asymmetry habit actually builds. Not just wealth, not just influence, but a life where you are genuinely free. You have spent the last hour on a journey that most people never take. You have looked directly at why the most successful people operate so differently from everyone else. You have seen how they risk small while thinking enormous. You have understood that their advantage is not luck or talent or access. It is a fundamentally different way of evaluating opportunities, positioning themselves, and making decisions. And here is what matters most right now. You do not need to become a different person to apply this. You do not need to wait for the perfect moment. You do not need permission or capital or connections. The asymmetry habit is available to you today, in whatever circumstances you find yourself in. It is available in the conversation you have this week. It is available in the small commitment you make this month. It is available in the positioning decision you make this quarter. It is available right now. The only requirement is that you stop thinking about asymmetry as a framework you understand and start thinking about it as something you do. Stop planning the implementation and start implementing. Make one small asymmetric decision. Execute on it. Make another. The compounding will not feel dramatic at first. It will feel quiet, ordinary, almost invisible. That is exactly how you know it is working. The most powerful forces move slowly at first. You are standing at a point where two paths diverge. One path continues as it has been. You understand the framework now. You will think about it occasionally. You will see opportunities and recognize their asymmetry, and you will do nothing. You will continue making the same decisions you have always made because understanding does not require change. The other path requires you to actually do something different, starting today. It requires you to risk small. It requires you to think enormous. It requires you to execute on small commitments, even when they generate no immediate visible results. It requires patience and discipline and faith in compounding. Only one of these paths leads to the life you are actually capable of building. Only one of these paths leads to genuine freedom and agency. Only one of these paths leads to waking up 5 years from now and realizing that the small, consistent decisions you made have compounded into something remarkable. The choice is yours. And unlike most choices, this one is not made once. It is made again every single day, in every single decision, in every single moment, when you have to choose between the small asymmetric move and the comfortable familiar path. Make the asymmetric choice.